myself. I'm in my backyard. This morning had an awesome yoga session. Actually, it wasn't awesome. It was awesome, but it was super difficult. And it was one of the first times where I just had to, I don't know, give up, cheat a little bit, take breaks because I was dying. So for guys that think that it's easy, oh man, it kicked my ass. So mentally, physically, it was rough. But I'm gonna be back there probably tomorrow, or the next night. We'll see. I think I'm gonna go to headquarters tonight. I haven't been there in a while, so it'll be good to roll. Now, today's episode, I thought maybe I'd just talk a little bit about writing. I don't know if any of you guys are interested in the process or anything like that, but I think I generally skip over stuff. I might mention it a lot. Like, I think I've mentioned quite a few times that I'm almost done with unlocking the cage, that it's almost finished, that I'm nearly done. I've been saying that for a while. But one thing that I realized while working on chapter 25, which is the final chapter, I couldn't have written it a year ago, because a year ago was when I had my last trip, I believe. At that point, I was ready to write the book. I probably, that's kind of when I started it. But it's not until now that I could write the end, because now I know what the finish is. So it's just kind of cool how that worked out. And a big part of it is the competition that happened this weekend. So it was the SJJIF World Jiu-Jitsu Tournament, and in Long Beach. And so it was a cool setting. The pyramid at Long Beach, very professional. Really like the way they ran their show. Just awesome. Libby's done one with them before. But so Libby had her match the first day, and she handled her nerves fine. She did great. I mean, it was she went against a tough competitor, a girl that she'd gone against before that has more experience, and it just, she knows her stuff. But Libby fought the whole time. It was just so awesome to see that, and she never gave up, and just went after. She was going for her stuff. So it was cool. But I was like, just the courage. I knew it's always been so much for me to watch her get out there, because I know how difficult it is, and we've talked about it, and I know what I experience, just how difficult that is to get out there, and for her to do that at such a young age, and and I know how much it's helped her too. And then that night was we went to the hotel where the rest of the team was, and all the kids were playing in the pool. Olivia and Jake just had such an awesome time. And then that night they were gonna be watching the fight. Everyone was all together, but instead of that, we stayed up in the room because Olivia was drained, which I totally get. She just wanted to read, and Jen couldn't really deal. She was dealing with her nerves. And that's what was really interesting to see, because for the last month she had a very hard time, wanting to do the competition, not wanting to. She's 40 years old, and this is the first time that she's been training, I think 7 or 8 months, maybe 9 months. Doing really well in class, loving it. Her knowledge is already way past mine. I'd listened to her and Olivia the other day talking about different moves, like what you would do. Oh, if I do this to you, then what are you gonna do? And they just had this long conversation, and it was awesome, and I was just following along, and it made so much sense. And so they know, they both had their games. But this was Jen's first time of doing a competition. I got to see her, the day of it. It was cool. We walked through some stuff downstairs. We drilled, maybe not drilled hard, but, and it was fun. And I could see exactly, she knew she had her plan. We worked on a couple things, how to tighten some stuff up, or different variations, and but it all made sense, and she had her game plan. And then we get there, and just the nerves. And I kept telling her, I was like, it's just think about how important it is. Why is it this important? And just to know that we all deal with it. Everyone's nervous. Anthony's been to war, and he gets nervous before tournaments. Until you've done enough, I think that's just part of it, and just having the confidence. A reminder, you've been under so much stress, her stress as running her law firm. That's an incredible amount of stress right there. Having to appear in front of a judge and argue a case, I was like, I couldn't even imagine that kind of stress. She's dealt with all kinds of stressful situations in her life, and she does amazingly well. But this was a different kind of stress. This was in performing in front of people. This was putting everything that she'd been she's devoted her whatever the last 9 months to this thing and really tried to learn it, and now she wants to try to prove it. She did it, and she went out there and conquered those nerves, and I couldn't even tell. She walked onto the mat like a martial artist, bowing in and shaking her opponent's hand, did everything. And then she had a very frustrating match where they stood up the entire time, but didn't go down once. And it was the other woman was throwing these like, it was crazy. It was pretty much looking like slaps, and the ref actually warned her, and kicks also. Like Jen has bruises up or down her legs, not real bad. They weren't hard kicks, but you could see them, and they had no purpose behind them. And if anyone wants to verify this, you can go on Flow Grappling. I think that's where it is, where they have all the matches. Because of course I'm going to be biased, but I was really trying to. I was like, well, what's she trying to do? But anyhow, it was pretty much a stalemate, and but Jen I thought was getting the better. All she was always either lower or just more relaxed, and then she went for a couple takedowns, and twice probably would have got them, but it was going. They had to stop because it went out of bounds, and then the third time, after all these punches and kicks, and the girl actually had a point taken away. Jen almost dumped her onto the score table, and for a second I thought she was going to, and then she ended up winning. She didn't, so she was cool about it, and then she ended up winning 0 to -1. And the other girl wasn't happy about it, but no, Jen won. So it was sad that she couldn't do what she wanted to try to do. But she just didn't feel with her knee injury and everything else, and not practicing the stand-up part of it that much. It was an awesome learning experience. So it was cool. She won and also got to learn, and yeah, so that was awesome. But it was coming. But what I was most proud of, it was for her doing the competition. I was like, why at 40 years old, why would you, and if you have your own business and whatever else, why would you risk competing? Why would you pay money to compete against another person who's going to try to submit you? Why do that? And that's something I struggled with. But I still, being there made me want to do it. I was like, I do want to compete. I don't want these nerves that everyone else is going through right now. But it's an awesome experience, and if you haven't done that before, I highly recommend it, man. You'll definitely learn a lot about yourself, and if you're ever that scared about something, it's like, yeah, you should do it. But, that was the hardest thing for her to do. I've never seen her that nervous about anything before in my life. So that was the hardest thing possible that she could do. That is one of the key factors with mixed martial artists. Like they're fighting or they're competing in MMA because it's the hardest thing possible that they know how to do. Day in and day out, like the training is only going to get harder. You're only going to go harder. You're only going to go harder. It's always going to be difficult. It is not an easy sport, but that's what most of these athletes, that's what a lot of them are drawn to. It's like, yeah, I want to do the hardest thing possible. Like if basketball was harder or more challenging or whatever else, it's like, yeah, I would probably do that. But no, just to get through it, man, to go through that grind and just to keep at it, and especially when you're early starting out, it's going to be awful and you're not going to make any money whatsoever. Yeah, that's tough. I was just thinking about that too, and wrapping up the book, just the amount of competition and why guys can get cut, so quickly from the UFC. Because, yeah, the market's just flooded with awesome athletes, and they're just starting at a younger and younger age, and the bigger the sport grows, the more. Like just this fight alone, how many future fighters did that fight spawn? Through social media, through TV, through parents, through everything. It's like everyone sees it now, and the kids see that there's money behind it. Parents see that there's money behind it. They start their kid in martial arts. Yeah, man. So it's just the competition is only going to get better, and that's another reason why I think it makes a lot of sense to have a union. But that's a whole nother subject. What else? Yeah, besides that, man, last night Anthony and I taught the class. Well, he mainly taught. I try to help. I'm doing it to learn. So I was like, I want him to be the teacher. I'd rather be the student there. I don't feel like my knowledge is there yet, or at least my teaching ability. So it's a cool way for me to learn and get comfortable. And I think I mentioned it on here, but Brightside and Twisted Reunion are being developed and adapted into screenplays, so and pitched. So we will see what happens with that. I'm feeling good about it though, man. I think everyone seems to be digging Twisted Reunion. When I put that out, I was thinking, horror stories, is there even gonna be like a market for it? But people that are reading it dig it. They like the mix of stories. So I think that'd be awesome to see them, just like on American Horror Story or something like that. And the awesome thing is, I'm going to be able to continue creating those kinds of stories all the time. Because sometimes I worry, I'm not going to write short stories anymore. But no, in the last 3 months, I started writing again while working on Unlocking the Cage. I think I've created 3 or 4 new short stories that should be coming out pretty soon. Or I might hold on to them for another collection. We'll see what happens with that. But I've been pretty happy with them, and it's been a lot of fun. And I have another 4 or 5 that are just like the second that I'm done with this final chapter and before the final edit, I'm going to go back and finish at least one. What I'm hoping is that is going to happen before I go on my trip to Arizona next week for Thanksgiving. Because I want to take those short stories with me and just develop them because, there's going to be some cool ones. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what story for today. What story would be a really cool... I want a new one that T. Quillen did. And remember, if you guys do want to check this out, the whole audiobook, you can get it on Audible, Twisted Reunion, or then you can get the individual audiobooks, the smaller ones. Like Each Down I Die, Everyone's Lethal, or Repackaged Presents. But if you haven't listened to any of them, get Twisted Reunion. It has T. Quillen narrating all of them, and it's pretty awesome. He does a way better job than I did. So let's do one of those. Let's do When It Rains. This was set in South Carolina, I believe. It was at a house I used to hang out at all the time, and there was a river behind the house, and so pretty much exactly the same place. I just changed a couple things. It rained a little bit harder, and in this story there are some creatures. I hope you guys enjoy this. This is When It Rains, narrated by T. Quillen. Peace.
When It Rains. Dell followed his boss and 2 coworkers onto the covered balcony of the second floor and took the chair next to Taylor. It was the seat closest to the kitchen. If they wanted to get wet, that was fine with Dell, but he was staying by the door. This wasn't just a mild September shower, a little thunderstorm. On a night like this, there was no telling how much rain the town was going to get. Lightning flashed, illuminated the entire property. "Holy crap," Martin said with his heavy Swiss accent. He pointed toward the rushing river some 20 yards away down the grassy slope. "You see that water? Look at that. Amazing, no?" Dell stretched his back, looked at the overflowing river, but kept his comments to himself. The torrential rains had transformed the usually quiet creek, upsetting the balance of things. Martin clearly wanted someone to agree with him, tell him it was a beautiful sight, but Dell figured he'd leave that to the other ass-kissers who'd say the grass was orange and pumpkins were green if their boss said it was so. Martin must have noticed Dell's indifference, because he was quick to ask, "Does this happen all the time? The crazy weather like this?" Taylor took a swig of his fruity drink. He looked like a clown with his flashy jewelry and trendy clothes. Maybe he fit in Hollywood, but if he ever ordered that in one of the local bars, he'd be laughed out of town. Taylor wiped his mouth and asked Dell, "Yeah, what the hell's up with this place? It was nice as shit earlier today, all warm and sunny like L.A. Dell was tempted to mention the gray clouds that had been on the horizon all afternoon, but thought better of it. Instead, he took a chug of his Bud Light and said, "The only difference was the lack of smog, huh? Remember just last week you couldn't stop raving about how great the clean air was?" Taylor didn't look away from the storm. "Yeah, too bad the frickin' pollen count's sky high. I've never sneezed so much in my life." "Seriously, Dell?" Martin asked in his slightly mixed-up English. The weather gets horrible all the time, no? Yes? Over in Ashford and sometimes in heaven, they get downpours like this, but not so much down here. Every once in a while it'll come down real hard like this, but it's usually just quick showers. Billy, who'd been unusually quiet most of the night, chuckled and polished off the rest of his Jack and Coke. Heaven. I can't believe you guys call the town heaven. He hawked a wad of phlegm into his empty plastic cup and tossed it onto the floor a few inches from Taylor's feet. There's a goddamn church on every corner and one in between them. And what the hell's up with not being able to get booze on Sundays? Taylor asked. Yeah, I thought the whole wine being blood bullshit made alcohol okay, Billy said, disgust dripping like the raindrops falling off the railing. Another lightning bolt lit up the sky. Dell inched his chair toward the kitchen just in case the next one found its way onto the balcony. People out here like to pray. Most of them got good reasons. Instead of letting it go, Billy continued. The whole God thing's bullshit, if you ask me. Martin said, Maybe you shouldn't be so quick to say such things. Who do you think makes the rain? Billy pushed out of his seat and headed toward Dell, who scooted his chair out of the way as the muscle-bound bully stomped into the kitchen, mumbling under his breath. Taylor took a sip of his drink. What the fuck's that guy's problem? Was he never an altar boy? Martin asked, seemingly surprised when everyone burst into laughter. Billy stumbled back onto the balcony, a fresh drink in his hand. What the hell's so funny? It was nothing, Taylor said. Just chill. This shit's miserable. You know how dirty the Escalade's gonna be tomorrow. We live on a goddamn dirt road. Another burst of lightning exploded above them. Taylor pointed to the driveway below. You might want to move it, Billy. If the water keeps rising, you're going to need to get it detailed. I mean, your rims are going to be a mess. Billy pulled the keys from his pocket and turned to Dell. Go throw it in the garage for me. I'm not going out there. Were you afraid of a little rain? No, I'm just not going out there. Come on. Billy took another drink. Earn your keep, man. You don't pay rent. Yeah, and neither do you. Plus, I'm only here during the week. What if I turn on the outside lights for you? Maybe Taylor can hold your hand. Dell wanted to tell Billy where he could go. Instead, he shook his head and sat back, stared out into the darkness. Billy stuffed the keys back into his pocket. Fine. No big deal. He told the group, although his tone said it was. I can afford to get it washed. The storm picked up. The rain slapping against the side of the house. Martin got out of his chair and asked everyone to scoot over. For someone who claimed to be an outdoorsman, he sure didn't like to get wet. It ain't gonna melt you none, Taylor said before quickly changing the subject. So guys, he said, are we gonna head out or what? I need to get laid. You want to go now? Dell asked. Taylor said, Hell yeah. Tonight's college night down at Frank's. The chicks can't hold their booze. There's nothing going on down anywhere, Dell said. Not in this weather. Stop being such a pussy, Billy said. You go ahead and go out there. I ain't going. Billy finished his drink and dropped his empty cup next to the first one. The storm will be over in 10 minutes. I bet my house it won't. Shit. It ain't a house, Dell, if you can drive it over here and drop it off in my driveway. Taylor snickered and then quickly told Billy, That's not funny, dude. You laughed. I was thinking about something else. Don't pay any attention to him, Dell. Dell cracked his thumb, pictured the gun in his nightstand drawer. I never do. Billy leaned forward in his chair and turned toward Dell. What's your problem with me, country boy? You jealous, or what? Dell was afraid of what he might say if he opened his mouth. Martin attempted to break the tension and suggested, No, fellas. Let's be quiet and enjoy this. I'm going to head in, Dell said as he rose from his chair. Got to get up early. He reached for the kitchen door and was turning the knob when lightning flashed. Taylor yelled and nearly fell out of his chair. What's your problem, Taylor? Billy asked. Did you guys see that? Taylor stammered, pointing toward the river. Holy shit, did you see it? See what? Billy asked, sounding bored. Look! Down there in the shadows! Dell peered into the darkness. He couldn't see anything, but he was afraid he knew what Taylor had seen. Straining to keep the fear from his voice, he asked, What did it look like? Leave the little girl alone, Billy said. He got spooked by a deer or some shit. Taylor got to his feet and backed into the wall. That was no deer. Keep looking down there. I'm not fucking around. Something's out there. Martin was starting to say that he couldn't see anything when lightning struck again. No one said a word, but they all saw it. Billy got closer to the edge of the balcony and stared into the black of the backyard. Martin turned to Dell and asked him what in the hell that thing was. A lurker, Dell said. Suddenly, Dell became the center of attention. Bombarded with questions, Dell tried to explain without sounding scared. I've never seen one before, but that's what it's got to be. You knew about these things? Billy shouted. I told you these things were here, but y'all didn't listen to me. Never do. Martin nearly shrieked. What do we do? Who do we call? It's all right, Dell said, trying to calm everyone down, including himself. Just leave it alone, and it'll leave us alone. Let's go inside. I don't think it likes to be watched. Billy returned to his chair. Screw that. I'm going to sit right here and watch where it goes. I'm not letting it sneak around until it finds a way in the house. Hell no, I'm not. Martin ran into the kitchen to get the phone. Dell told the other two, I said you guys were crazy for living close to the river. No one with any sense has a house near the river. Electricity ripped through the darkness. The yellowish creature, looking like a man-sized lump of Play-Doh covered in mud and algae, slowly climbed the embankment, the rising river at its feet. It's getting closer, Taylor shouted. You didn't say shit about those things. I said there were probably lurkers in the river. That's why I said not to go down there. I thought it meant a fucking raccoon or skunk or some shit. Yeah, Billy agreed. Or some crazy fish thing. Martin ran back out onto the balcony, cell phone in his hand. No signal. Everyone else checked their own. Not a single bar. They went inside and found the landline was dead too. Storm must have knocked it out. Happens all the time, Dell said, even though he'd never had it go out. God damn it. Taylor stuffed his phone back into his pocket. I always gotta go at least 10 feet from the house to make a call. God damn it. Taylor stuffed his phone back into his pocket. I always gotta go at least 10 feet from the house to make a call. So go do it, Billy ordered. Fuck you, you go do it. Dell said, It won't do no good nohow. Police won't do nothing. Why the hell not? Taylor shouted. There's a monster down there. Relax, Dell said. They won't bother you as long as you don't bother them. Just stay inside. Dell had no idea if this was true or not, but he'd heard it at the grocery store last week from two good old boys picking up a carton of chum. Absolutely, Martin said. We stay inside. And lock every door and window, Billy said. Dell smiled, enjoying that the oh-so-smart city boys were finally paying heed to what he said. Just to be safe, Dell said, and walked through the kitchen. Where are you going? Martin asked as a thunderclap shook the house. To my room? He could tell they were impressed by his couldn't-care-less attitude, and he wasn't about to blow it by telling them he was going for his Glock. If the stories were true, the lurker wouldn't go down easily. The good old boys said they'd seen one take 3 rounds in the chest and still get away. Dell paused to flip on the light before descending the staircase. He hurried down and headed for his room, disappointed at himself for being frightened. Nothing was in the house. The lurker could rummage around the river until it found a dog or a cat or some unfortunate creature, and then it would return to its home in the Canaton Caves. After entering his room and pulling his .357 out from under the mattress, Dell stretched out on his bed and waited, listened to the raging storm. Twice he thought the loud bang outside his bedroom window might have been something other than thunder, but he reassured himself it was nothing but his nerves. Lurkers wouldn't try to get in a house, especially a locked one with 4 men inside. Dell studied the window, wondering if he should pull down the shade. He decided not to, figured he'd want to know if a monster was on the side of the glass. He wouldn't shoot it unless it attacked, but if it did, he was going to put a hole in that son of a bitch's head. Someone upstairs shouted. It sounded like Billy. A moment later, everyone yelled. Dell jumped off his bed and ran for the staircase. Bounding up the stairs 2 at a time, he reached the top and rushed through the kitchen, chambering around, afraid of what he would find on the balcony. Before he lost his nerve, he kicked open the door and took aim. He lowered the gun when he realized the 3 idiots were cheering. Billy held a bow. A quiver of arrows rested at his feet. "He got him!" Taylor shouted. "He got that motherfucker!" "Right in the goddamned eye," Billy said with his voice full of giddy pride. Martin smiled and clapped Billy on the back. "One heck of a shot is this guy." Another flash of lightning. Dell looked beyond the balcony and spotted the lurker lying flat on its back. The blue bolt of an arrow pointing toward the sky. He turned to the 3 men. "Why? Why'd you do that? I told you to leave them be." "He was coming for the house," Taylor said defensively. Dell didn't want to admit it, but the lurker was only 15 yards from the house, its body illuminated by the light from the window of the back door. "You still shouldn't have done that." Thunder rocked the house and the skies opened, doubling the deluge. A muddy stream lapped at the dead lurker's webbed foot. If the storm didn't let up, there'd be flooding in the house within minutes. "Another one!" Taylor shouted, pointing just beyond the slain creature. Dell followed the direction of Taylor's trembling hand, straining to see through the sheet of pounding rain. A shapeless yellow figure was emerging from the roaring river, extending an arm toward its dead brethren. Billy knocked an arrow and told Taylor to get out of his way. Taylor did, and Billy took aim. Before Billy could shoot, Dell grabbed hold of the arrow. "Don't do it!" "Look at it!" Billy yelled. His arms trembled as he tried to keep the bow taut. "Let me shoot!" With his hand on the arrow, half expecting it to fly and rip the skin off his palm, Dell glanced over the railing. The creature knelt in the muck next to its dead friend. It looked from the arrow to the balcony. Its expressionless eyes studied each of them. Then it lifted its head to the sky, and a horrifying howl pierced the night, louder than the pounding rain and thunder. "God damn it, let me shoot it!" Billy screamed, and Taylor and Martin both shouted for Dell to let go of the arrow. Although he held the gun and could call the shots if he desired, Dell wasn't ready for that responsibility. He'd been taught to leave the lurkers alone. But what if that was wrong? And they'd already shot one. This wasn't up to him anymore. They were all grown men. All he could do was tell them what he knew. A loud, sucking pop, like the top being pulled off a can of tuna, drew their attention down below. The lurker held the arrow in his hand, a slimy black mass trailing from the tip. The body from which the arrow had been pulled began to deflate. large pieces of its mottled skin sloughing off and dissolving in the rising water that had already reached its chest. "Jesus fucking Christ," Taylor said, looking like he might lose the fruity contents in his stomach. Dell let go of the arrow and turned toward the kitchen. A loud twang sliced through the air, followed by a series of cheers and high fives. The weight of the gun was reassuring, but for the first time in his 10 years of owning it, he wasn't comfortable with only 15 rounds in the magazine. He wished to God he'd brought along his extra boxes of ammo that were collecting dust back home. Dell knew they probably wouldn't listen, but he shouted anyway. "Everyone get inside!" Only Billy responded, and it wasn't polite, so Dell continued toward his room. As he passed the fridge, Taylor yelled, "There's another one!" "There, too!" Martin shouted. Billy said, "I see 4 of them." Lurkers weren't supposed to travel in packs, according to everything Dell had heard. Some even claimed there weren't but 1 or 2 that existed. Dell ran for the near wall and flipped the switches, turning on the floodlights. When he made it to the balcony, he counted 6 of the disgustingly strange beasts. They were sloshing through the river toward the dissolving heap of yellow by the back door. The other 3 were already on the driveway. "The Escalade! Fuck no!" Billy shrieked, knocking an arrow and taking aim. He released the arrow and it zipped past the nearest lurker and punctured the driver's door. "They're too far away," Taylor said. "Get the ones near the house." Martin agreed and told Billy to get the ones closest to the back door. Billy turned to Dell. "I'll take care of these. Get the ones out there." A series of thuds came from the driveway. Though not appearing very solid, the lurkers packed a punch. In a matter of seconds, the Escalade was crumpled. "That's a $75,000 vehicle, you motherfuckers," Billy cried and shot one straight through the neck. "It's already ruined. You've got insurance," Taylor reminded him. Billy was out of arrows. "Give me your gun," he said to Dell. Dell shook his head. The sound of smashing glass and crunching metal mixed with the roaring river. "Come on, you pussy," Billy said. "If you're not going to use the gun, give it to me. I'll shoot them if they come in the house. We don't need to piss them off any more than we already have." Another deafening howl tore through the night. Billy said, "They're taunting us." "Let them." Dell turned his back on the group. "I suggest you guys get inside." "Fuck you," Billy said, and started charging. Dell spun toward Billy and shoved the barrel of the .357 at Billy's head. "Come at me again, and I'll put a bullet between your eyes, you son of a bitch." Billy glared at Dell, but the Glock's barrel must have been too intimidating because he finally stepped back. Still aiming at Billy's forehead, tempted to pull the trigger, Dell said, "Do what you want, but you're not touching this gun." Dell spotted a quiver in the corner. So did Billy, but he kept eye contact with Dell. "I'm not scared of them. Not like you." "Yeah, and I'm not drunk or stupid like you," Dell said. Billy brushed past Dell, grabbed an arrow, and ran for the front door. The guy was as dumb as anyone Dell had ever met. Once Dell heard the door open and close, he returned his attention to the back, where the lurkers were still reducing the Escalade to a hunk of scrap metal. "Hurry up, Dell," Taylor urged, peering over the railing. "They're right below us." "Back up and be quiet, both of you." From the look on Martin's face, it was obvious that Martin didn't like being told what to do. So Dell added, "Trust me on this." Martin nodded and stepped away from the railing, just as a shrill twang came from the driveway. The lurker who'd been caving in the rear of the Cadillac fell to its knees, the blue tip of the arrow sticking out of the back of its head. Billy rushed onto the scene, grabbed a stray arrow off the ground. With the bow stretched to its limit and an arrow ready to fly, he swiveled towards the lurker on the passenger side and let the arrow loose. It missed its target and glanced off the demolished vehicle. Billy looked around for another arrow. With the unnatural speed of a tsunami, the lurkers hurtled toward Billy from the other side. Before he could do so much as scream, the lurkers were lying on top of him, one ripping through his stomach, throwing heaps of intestines over his shoulder, while one clamped its massive jaws on Billy's face and began tearing out chunks. Taylor was yelling something at Dell when an enormous crash shook the balcony. Dell glanced over the railing, but he didn't see any of the creatures, only the water lapping at the house.
"What in hell was that?"
Martin asked, his voice shaking worse than the balcony had. "The door, I think."
"You think?"
Taylor yelled. Before Dell could tell him to back away, Taylor was on his hands and knees, his head between the posts of railing peering over the edge.
"Holy shit. They knocked down the goddamn door. They're inside."
"Come on," Dell said, as he watched the two lurkers in the driveway get up from their victim, leaving an unrecognizable mess where Billy had been only a few moments before. Both of them staggered toward the Escalade, grabbed hold of the rear bumper, and heaved the SUV off into the brush. Dell felt a sense of helplessness at their inhuman strength. Taylor followed Dell's gaze in time to see the Escalade crash onto its roof, its momentum rolling it into the river.
"They're damming it."
Martin's eyes grew wider.
"What do you mean, damn?"
"Taylor, get away from the railing," Dell ordered. "Both of you, follow me, come on." Suddenly, a purple tongue the width of Dell's wrist, and God knew how long, shot through the air, wrapped around Taylor's neck, and started to pull him through the railing. Dell yelled for Martin to grab Taylor's feet as he ran to the railing and stuck the .357's barrel against the beast's tongue. Taylor gurgled as he tried to pull away from the tongue with the gun just inches from his face. Realizing he had to risk damaging Taylor's hearing in order to save his life, Dell pulled the trigger. The tongue blew apart, spattering the side of Taylor's face. Martin yanked Taylor back and helped him tear at the dissolving tissue still wrapped around his neck, clumps plopping on the ground. Dell held the kitchen door open for them. "Inside, now!" This time there was no hesitation. Martin brushed by Dell. Taylor cried out. He had been right behind Martin, but now he was reeling backward. One grotesque tongue gripping his left ankle, another latched onto his right bicep. Dell reached for Taylor's outstretched hand, but he wasn't fast enough. Dell heard a sickening snap as Taylor's lower back smashed into the railing, the agony on his face indicating that it was his back that had broken, not the wooden railing. Martin stayed pressed against the wall at the back of the balcony as Dell ran to the railing, aiming with his right hand, trying to pull Taylor back with his left. There were 5 lurkers below. 2 were yanking with their tongues, while the others waited patiently. The lurkers were using Taylor to help pull themselves up. Just as Dell was about to fire at one latched onto Taylor's ankle, the creature next to it let its own tongue fly. Dell swiveled and fired 2 rounds, both bullets striking the lurker's spongy forehead. At the same instant, the meaty tongue slapped Dell's forearm and then fell to the floor. Dell turned back to his original target and fired 2 more rounds. The creature fell backward, losing its control on Taylor's leg. Neither Dell nor Taylor was prepared for the sudden release of tension. Taylor fell forward, his face bouncing off the floor. Dell lost his grip, and Taylor was whipped off the balcony, his scream silenced abruptly when he splashed into the rising water below. Pulling the trigger as fast as he could, Dell killed the lurker that had pulled Taylor down, as well as the one whose teeth were buried in Taylor's neck. But before he could shoot the third, an explosion rocked the house. The indoor lights went out all at once, leaving the floodlights as the only thing between them and complete darkness. The black seemed to amplify the smacking, slurping, and snarling down below. Dell backed away from the railing until he bumped into Martin, shaking against the door. He stepped back into the pitch-black kitchen, bringing Martin with him and closing the door behind them.
I don't want to be here.
The circuit breaker is down there. They took it out.
We need to go away from here.
Dell was just as scared as Martin, but he didn't like hearing the panic in his boss's voice. You want to try running out the front door? I don't.
My Porsche. It's in the garage.
Dell looked around at the dark room, unable to see past the kitchen's center island. Even if the lurkers haven't gotten into the garage, the water sure as hell has. The car probably won't start.
We try.
Dell waited for a crash of thunder to finish before he told Martin to go right ahead and try to reach his car.
We stick together?
Yeah, Dell said. He sniffed the air. Something was burning.
So we go to the garage?
I didn't say that.
Okay. I'll take the gun.
Hell no, Dell said, having a difficult time hearing anything over the pounding rain. Martin held out his hand.
Dell, give me the gun.
I'm going upstairs. You can follow me if you want. Martin grabbed his arm.
Hand over gun and I'll give you a raise.
Dell shook his head at the man's absurdity. Find the flashlight. It's in one of those drawers by the sink. And hurry up, Dell said, aiming the .357 at the kitchen doorway, even though he could barely see past the tip of his gun's fluorescent front sight. Martin opened a drawer.
I double your pay.
Shut up, Dell said. He listened. He thought he heard footsteps. A wave of smoke washed over him, stinging his eyes. Hurry up. I think it's the one closest to me. One drawer slid shut and another opened.
Here it is,
Martin said as he clicked the light on. Dell's heart caught in his throat as the lurker's bloated face appeared less than 2 yards in front of him. He pulled the trigger 3 times, erasing its twisted smile. Martin gasped, and the flashlight clattered to the floor, its beam shooting past Dell's feet. He spun toward Martin, taking aim at the lurker holding his boss. The monster's arm covered the man's entire face. Before Dell could get off a shot, he heard the sound of a tongue being launched from the far corner. Dell ducked, crawled around the island. A cabinet door shattered. Dell fired 3 rounds where he thought the lurker was. It sounded as if 2 bodies fell to the floor. One was definitely Martin. Dell heard his gurgled plea for help. Aware that there was at least one more lurker in the room, Dell bent over and picked up the flashlight. He brought it up and spun in a circle. A gang of yellow creatures surrounded him, and a dozen yellow-black eyes glistened in the dim light. Dell had 3 rounds left in the Glock. Not enough to kill them all.